Now, the next speaker is an account manager, international account manager with the Lift Institute in the Netherlands, which is a certification body in that country. It covers the areas of North America and Europe. So if you are interested in operating in any of the two, you would go to one stop for your certification through that institute. Just like Mr. Sheng, the next speaker is also the face of the industry around the world. You see both of them everywhere you go where there's any discussion about lifts and elevators. It's his first time in the country. Please join me in giving him a very warm welcome to our land. Thank you very much, sir. Good luck. Okay. Okay.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. I've got some problems with my voice, so sorry about that. Thank you very much. Today I'm going to talk about perhaps an interesting subject for, I hope, at least some of you. I already had a couple of discussions on it. I heard some of the presenters were already talking about the introduction of EN 80, 120 and 50 standards in South Africa. You're just on at the start of it, I understood. And what I would like to focus on today is a very important function of the EN 80, 120 and 50 standards, which is the role it has in promoting innovation. It's a very important function of it, and I would like to focus on that. And I've got it very simplified, and because I don't want any distraction to other topics, so it's not a broad presentation on EN 80, 120 and 50 standards, but it's purely focused on the promotion of innovation role which it has. Before starting to do so, I would like to thank the sponsors of the GLE Expo. There were a few of them, I believe, and I also would like to thank Virgo Communications for the organization of this wonderful event, which we will have today and the other 2 days which are upcoming. I can try to say it in 3 different languages, which are, I think, important here in this country. It's the first one is easy for me because Afrikaans is close to my home language, which is Dutch. It's dankie, and correct me if I'm wrong. And the second one and the third one, I'm just trying. I've never heard, so maybe I'm doing it completely wrong. So I'm sorry about that in advance. Nigia bonga and Nkosi. So I hope that was okay. Okay. Before I start on talking about the EN 80, 120 and 50 standards and the promotion of innovation, I would like to briefly explain about Lift Institute. I was asked by the organization to do so because I can imagine for some of you, or for maybe many of you, the organization is still quite unknown. As you can see, we were established in 1933. That's already quite some time ago, so we may truly say that we are an experienced company because we have over 85 years of dedicated lifts and escalators experience, if we may say so. Our head office is in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, and we have 2 regional Middle East offices in Dubai, in UAE, the Emirates, and in Istanbul, Turkey. I think we can truly say that we are worldwide. We are one of the leading institutions for safety inspections, but even more for certifications of complete lifts, escalators, and lift components. As you know, there are a few more, but Lift Instituut is one of those who's completely focused, or is the only one who's completely focused on escalators and lifts. That's all we do. That's our business. We do trainings for inspectors, but also in the fields of codes and standards and legislation. I can imagine maybe that for your country, for South Africa, for example, and other regions in South Africa, or in Africa, sorry, in the continent of Africa, that could be an interesting topic for let's say to make the next steps. We do a lot of guidance services. Some people call it consultancy, but we like to call it guidance in the same field. I mean, the fields of codes and standards for inspectors. And for example, two governments who make already a use of our services a lot are the governments in Singapore and South Korea. We've done a lot of active guidance and training with them already. We are a notified body within the European legislation, but at the same time, we are also an accredited elevator and escalator certification organization. They call it an ACO in North America, and that's based on the performance-based code, SME A17.7, CSA B44.7. CSA is the Canadian version. I think it's important to mention that because that makes us kind of unique in the world of notified bodies, because we are the only notified body, or the only certification body, I should say, which is accredited as an ACO as well as a NOBO. So, and that makes us popular with big companies, with big multinational elevator manufacturers, because it's of course very easy, or it's very interesting to have your certification done with one in the same company, in this case Lift Instituut, because they can do it for North America as well as Europe. And if you have the plans to launch the product in both markets, it's of course it's a good selling point for us. Well, Mr. Zhang Lexiang was telling us a lot about China. China, of course, is a very important market for us as well. We don't have a branch yet in China, but we do have active partnerships with some leading Chinese testing laboratories, like there is Shanghai Jiaotong University Elevator Test Center in Shanghai. We have NETEC in Langfang. We have CISE in Shenzhen. And we also work with the fire testing laboratory called CABR in Beijing. So those cooperations, those partnerships are very important to us, because it makes it possible for us to become a better partner for Chinese companies who would like to export to, for example, Europe, or maybe in the odd case even North America, because they can do the testing in China, Shanghai, Shenzhen, or Langfang, for example. And based on their testing, we do the certification. Of course, that's very important that we check and we monitor. We do surveillance every year on those testing laboratories, because it's our accreditation which is at stake, not theirs. So and we do that, and we've done already quite a few European certifications for those companies in cooperation with those test laboratories. So that's good, and we are happy with that, and that explains that China is an important market. We do exhibit at leading trade shows. For example, in 2019, we were in Istanbul, and we will be in Augsburg in Germany, which is the one upcoming in October. And well, we do not exhibit at this one, but it's the first one. Maybe in future we will here in Johannesburg. But I do see it's a good show. And we've already completed CE certificates for many lift companies from all over the world. And every company, every client, of course, is important to us. Also the medium-sized players, even the smaller players. But I mean, I think for you, it's at least interesting to know that we work also for the big ones. In fact, all the big companies, all the big multinational companies are clients of us, like ThyssenKrupp Elevator, like Otis, and we work for Otis. We work in North America, we work for them in Europe, we work for them in China. Kony, Schindler, Mitsubishi in Japan, Hitachi in Japan, Fujitec in Japan, Toshiba in Japan, and for example, Arona in Spain, which is also an interesting player in the market. But once again, also a lot of medium-sized players, also medium-sized component manufacturers are among our clients. Well, let's come back to the topic. Talking about the EN 8120 and 50 standards. I think it's important to mention that those standards are in power in countries within the European Union. Europe as a whole is 51 countries. European Union is not 51, it's 28. 28 countries are member of it. Soon maybe it will be only 27. I don't think I need to tell you about that, because everybody is following the international news. But and that's where, let's say, EN 81-2050 standards are coming from. Let's have a look at this, at the requirements. When we look at those standards, and I think it's very important to mention that for those countries in the world where the prescriptive technical specification, and I mean prescriptive, that's the important word, is embedded in the regulations, it applies possible barriers for innovation, because companies can only work along those prescriptive codes, prescriptive specification. In effect, the EN 81-20 and 50 standards have a different approach, I would say. And some places in the world, it's working the prescriptive way. And let's look at the other way, as I was saying, the way where it's possible to deviate and not to work just along the prescriptive code. And that's the code we have in Europe, the EN 81-20 and 50 code. It's linked to the LIFT directive, and that one is mandatory in the EU. But the underlying standards, the EN 81-20 and 50, they form one voluntary way to comply with the legal requirements of the directive. And once again, very important, that's why it's underlined, it's voluntary. Once again, the directive is mandatory. That means what is written in there, deviation is not allowed. But the underlying EN 81-20 and 50 standards are voluntary, and that means deviation is allowed. And that is important to keep in mind. And we will come back on the deviation part soon in this presentation. This is a little presentation. As I said, the European system enhances or stimulates innovation because the directives provide safety goals only, but they are performance-based. And that's the big difference with certain areas outside Europe where legislation for lifts and safety components for lifts is based on prescriptive standards which are often mandatory. In the European Union, manufacturers may choose to follow either the standards EN 81-20 or 50, or to include innovation in lift technologies proven by risk assessment. And this risk assessment needs to be made by the manufacturer itself. Sometimes companies come up to us and say, oh, can you make the risk assessment then for us? No, we only judge and we assess the risk assessment. We try to help as much as possible, but of course it should always be allowed according to we cannot do a full consultancy on that, because we know, of course, how other companies do so. So we can only give you some brief guidance on it, but we always try to say more than just yes or no. Some of our competitors do, but we always try to guide companies through this. But the risk assessment needs to be made by the manufacturer itself. So once again, deviations of the EN 81-20 and 50 standards are allowed under the directive. A notified body, like LIFT Instituut, always assesses the conformity of the deviation of the safety level of the harmonized standard by, as we call it, an EU type certification, for example. And the risk assessment, once again, needs to be made by the manufacturer. The conformity assessment of lifts and safety components for lifts has been assigned to independent notified bodies. I mentioned that before already. An example of such conformity assessment is EU type examination. Notified bodies are appointed by national authority, in our country, called RVA for example, but recognized by the European Union. That's the umbrella underneath everything happens. The European Union with headquarters in Brussels, Belgium. Well, now you heard a lot about, let's say, the whole system behind it, although I simplified it to make things clear. And I think it's, for you, I guess, interesting now to show you some examples of products which have been made possible because of the fact that manufacturers are allowed to deviate. If they would not have been allowed to deviate, those products would probably not have existed or would not have been there. And some of them are kind of simple products, more or less, and some of them are more complex. But those are examples. And I would like to show you a few examples to give you an idea of what we are talking about. And I guess some of you know those products, of course, already, or maybe all of you, but just to make you aware of it. Examples of EU innovation. The first one I would like to do is the Koni Ultra Rope, lightweight coated carbon fiber core belt. Well, 3 of those elements are not in the EN 8120 and 50 standards. Coating is not being considered. Carbon fiber core is not being considered. Flat belt as a constructional shape for suspension mean is not being considered. So, Kone proved to the notified body, which was us, Lift Institute, based on their risk assessment, which they need to make themselves, that a product is at least equally safe as being described in the standards. So that made it possible for us to certify and for Kone to put this very innovative product on the market. So that's one example. And there are many belt examples, to be honest. And so obviously, in the world of suspension means it's a popular way of making innovative products. Next one is the Otis belt with the pulse monitoring. Well, pretty clear is that the flat belt as a constructional shape is not being considered in the EN 8120 and 50 standard. So that was a deviation as well. And well, in effect, I guess you know what the pulse monitoring is about. That's to check the small diameter wire ropes which are inside the belt. The safe working of it. Another one, again, a suspension mean example. It's the Bekart from Belgium, PU coated suspension rope with a rope diameter of less than 8 millimeters, and the standard is requiring or saying that you need a minimum of 8 millimeter diameter rope. So that's where they are deviating, and of course the other way they're deviating is that the coating, which in this case is PU, is not being considered in the standard either. So the standard is only referring to steel wire rope, not to the coatings. So those are 2 deviations, but they were able to show to the notified body that the product is at least equally safe as within the standard, as is written in the standard, as recorded in the standard. So therefore they passed and they were certified. Next one is not a suspension mean, but a very interesting product. It's a product which is under certification. It's not certified yet. It's the Multi. It's a complete elevator system made by ThyssenKrupp. It's a system with horizontally and vertically moving cars, linear motor driven. That means no suspension ropes. So I would say a very challenging new product. I'm sure that everybody here has heard about it already. It's under certification by us. Lift is doing the certification. And, well, it's a challenging product. Will still take some time to get it certified. But there is more than one cabin in one shaft. That's a deviation from the standard. Okay, the twin product had the same thing already. That's also two cabins in one shaft. No suspension ropes. It's linear motor driven, as I said. And there is horizontal movement of cars, which is, of course, totally new as well. And those things are all deviations from the current standards. And we, as a certification body, are now together with all the people of ThyssenKrupp looking at it and see how safe it is and whether they can reach at least the same safety level as being written in the standards, in the EN 8120 and 50 standards. So interesting. I'm sure we'll hear about it more in the near future. The next one is, I mentioned already, the Spanish company Orona, a machine roomless lift with an alternative headroom of 3,000 millimeters. That's a deviation of the standard because normal for the EN 8120 lift is at least 3,400 millimeters headroom. But they showed, they proved to the notified body, us in this case, that it is at least equally safe, and they were therefore able and allowed to put it on the markets. The next one is a suspension mean again. It's a Schindler STM PU coated suspension belt, and I think if you look carefully at all my other examples, then I guess you know already which what the deviations are with this one, because I mentioned them before with the other examples. The flat belt as a constructional shape is not being considered in the EN 8120/50 standards, and the PU coating is not being considered either. So those two were the deviations, but again, Schindler was able to prove that the product is at least equally safe. I'm repeating myself, I understand, I know, but I hope it brings the message across. Then I think two or three more examples to go. Spanish company Agui, they manufactured a foldable balustrade cabin roof, and I would like to stress the fact that it is foldable because it allows a more efficient use of headroom. But a foldable balustrade is not being considered in the EN 8120/50 standards, and therefore a deviation. But they prove to us it is at least equally safe. Then the last example for Europe, it's the Witour M-Line foldable car sill apron. Again, I would like to stress the fact that it's foldable because this has nothing to do with the headroom, but it has all to do with the pit room. It allows a more efficient use of the pit room. But a foldable car sill apron is not being considered in the EN 8120 and 50 standards. Therefore a deviation. But it was showed that it is at least equally safe as written in the EN 8120 and 50 standards. Last one, I mentioned North America to you before, but it's about Europe, this presentation, but I would like to mention it because, as I mentioned to you before, we are an ACO as well in North America, and that means that we there's a kind of same working, although it's different, but they have a prescriptive code called the ESME A17.1, and they have a performance-based code, which is the ESME A17.7. We are accredited for the ESME A17.7, and based on this ESME A17.7, we were able to certify this product, and that was quite a shock in North America itself, because North America is a very traditional market, and the pneumatic vacuum elevator was always being considered as and maybe still is, as a very as an odd one, as a strange product, and it was kind of a shock to the people in the North American lift industry that this product was being certified by us. But it was very simple. I mean, based on this American SME 17.7 code, it was very clear that the product was at least equally safe as written in the prescriptive code SME 17.1. But the product, no traction, no hydraulics, but it's driven by air, so it's different. And based on their risk assessment, we certified it according to the performance-based code SME 17.7, and also we certified it according to the European code. So we did both, and the manufacturer is still very happy with it, and lots of them are being sold all over the world, I would say. So an interesting example, I think, of what is possible based on a performance-based code, in this case in North America. Then I would like to conclude with a general summary, which is very simple, I would say. Once again, the European Lift Directive provides the mandatory framework. The EN 81, 20 and 50 underlying standards are voluntary. Deviation is allowed as long as it has been approved by a notified body. And this Lift Directive, in combination with the EN 81, 20 and 50 standards, stimulate, or I should say enhance, innovation in lifts and safety components. And I think as an industry, as a market, it's important that we do enhance, that we do stimulate innovation to get us to make the next steps in the industry. Well, then I would like to say thank you. Thank you for your attention. Dankie voor uw aandacht, I believe in Afrikaans. The third one is difficult, but I'm maybe gonna try. If you promise to me that you're not gonna laugh, it's Nigebonga Nagu Kunaka Kwako. I'm not sure. Enkosi Nengwa Balazelo Yako. So I hope it was kind of okay. Thank you very much.